What's up, everybody? My name's Josh. I'm the fantasy football buff. You can find me on Instagram at fantasy.football.buff. And today I'm going to be talking about Saquon Barkley. More specifically, I'm going to lay out 5 reasons for why I believe Saquon Barkley could be a bust going into 2020. So without further ado, let's get it. Before I start this video, it is important to highlight what I mean when I say he's a potential bust candidate. The definition of a bust is very simple. It's that the player does not finish where you drafted them. So if Saquon Barkley right now is going with the first or second overall pick in drafts, I am simply going to lay out reasons why he could finish behind that, which are reasons to take into consideration when you're taking a pick that high in drafts. Here are Saquon's stats in 2019, which were honestly very impressive. He only played a full 12 games, but still was able to break 1,000 rushing yards. He added 52 receptions for 438 yards and 2 extra touchdowns on top of these stats. Now let's look at it from a fantasy perspective. He was taken as the consensus #1 overall pick in 2019, and as you can see in his game log here, weeks 1 through 2 prior to the injury, he was the RB6. So he wasn't necessarily elite, but he was an RB1, even though that is an incredibly small sample size. Then week 3, the high ankle sprain hits, and from week 3 to week 7, he does not return. But from that point on, he comes back week 7. From then on to week 17, he was the 4th best running back in fantasy football. But as you can see from these numbers, that ranking might be a little misleading. According to this game log, he scored under 9 points in 3 of his last 10 games. Right, against the Jets, week 10, the man rushed the ball 13 times for a single yard. All right, the offense itself was just pathetic on the Giants side. What really elevated his numbers, his ranking overall, was how he performed in the fantasy playoffs. In week 16, as you can see here, and weeks 15, he blew up. He was the unquestioned RB1 during that time, but he was playing against Miami and the Washington Redskins, who are bottom 4 rush defenses in the league. Guys, give me a shoulder pads and helmet, and I'll go run for a couple hundred yards against that Dolphins defense last season. All right, so if you take away those last 2 games, right, if you take away what really boosted his numbers, after he returned from injury, he was the RB13 weeks 7 through 14, which is not someone winning you weeks. And if you did draft Saquon with the 101 overall, chances are you didn't make the playoffs for him to blow up like he did. But there's the argument to be made that he was recovering from injury, and that's what slowed him down. But regardless, for your fantasy team, he was not worth the 101 investment, unfortunately. Before you guys blow up the comment section and hit that dislike button, I need to set something straight. I believe that Saquon Barkley is one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in the entire NFL right now. Just look at his physical ability. He was 97th percentile when he ran a 4.40 40-yard dash. His speed score was in the 99th percentile. His burst score was in the 96th percentile. Bench press, 96th percentile. And he has some of the best quads in the game. He is just a freak athlete, and there's a lot of hype surrounding Saquon going into 2020 for a lot of legitimate reasons. To play devil's advocate, from my point, I mean, if Daniel Jones takes a step forward and this offense improves and Saquon will have a better shot at scoring more touchdowns. They upgraded their offensive line. They added 3 offensive linemen in the draft for their 2020 draft, and they added Cameron Fleming from the Cowboys, improving that line in front of Saquon, hopefully opening up more holes, giving him more explosive opportunity, and he will have a full year to recover. Statistically speaking, you could tell that he was being hindered by that high ankle sprain in 2019, and in theory, if all these things hit, he'll go back to being that elite running back he was in 2018, and that's why he's being drafted with the first couple picks going into 2020. That all being said, and physical talent aside, if you want Saquon Barkley on your team in 2020, you're going to have to invest a top 2 pick in him, and there are a lot of red flags surrounding Barkley's situation moving forward. And the red flag number 1 is targets. Guys, I don't know if you knew this, but Eli Manning threw the ball to Saquon Barkley 121 times in 2018 when Saquon finished as the RB1. That's as many targets as Chris Godwin saw just last season. Now, the reason Saquon saw so many targets is because Eli Manning might as well have been playing in a wheelchair, right? As soon as the defense got in his face, he dumped it off to Saquon, and we saw a shift in play once Danny Dimes took the start. Daniel Jones has legs under him. He has the ability to extend the play if the defense get on him. He's not going to automatically throw to Saquon, and we saw that happen in 2019. When Daniel Jones got the start, Saquon saw 2 less targets per game. Now, if we project that forward, that's still giving Saquon between 80 to 90 targets, which is still elite and amazing and what I want in a running back. But it's not the same insane floor as we saw in 2018 when Saquon saw 120 targets. That's over 30 targets less and will hurt his weekly floor. Red flag number 2 is the question marks around the new coaching staff in New York. Joe Judge was hired as the new head coach, and he had no experience head coaching prior to this job. He was the special teams coach for the New England Patriots since 2012. He was their wide receiver coach for the Pats last season, but now he has no experience, not only in team leadership, but in play calling either. And historically speaking, head coaches who come in, they struggle year one, especially the ones who have no head coaching experience, much less any major coordinator experience in their past. Now, I get they also hired Jason Garrett as their new offensive coordinator, and there were moments where the Cowboys had offensive success with Jason Garrett as the head coach. But even last season, when the Cowboys were an elite offense, Kellen Moore, their offensive coordinator, was calling all the plays in Dallas, right? So who's going to be calling plays for this team? What kind of playbook are they going to be used? There's rumors they're going to lean towards the Cowboys' old playbook, but Jason Garrett wasn't known for being creative with getting his players the ball. All I'm saying, there's risk involved. All I'm saying, there's another question mark, another red flag around a player you're going to have to draft at the very beginning of drafts to get. The third red flag for Saquon Barkley was his efficiency. Barkley led the league in 2018 with 16 runs of 20-plus yards. If you do that math, that's one long run every single game he played. And I remember watching this. I had Saquon Barkley on one of my teams back in 2018, and halfway through his first game against the Jaguars, I was really concerned about his output, and then he did this.
Of 7, Beckham's 8th reception. Now Barkley up the middle, cuts to the outside. Saquon Barkley across midfield, down the sideline, stayed in bounds, and Barkley takes it all the way. 68 yards.
Guys, 68 yards of his final 106 were on that play. Had he not broken that long play in the fourth quarter, he would have finished with 38 rushing yards and no touchdowns. Now, we saw that efficiency regress in 2019. He went from getting a long run in 100% of his games to only 65% of his games, which I think is more realistic. Now, I understand that he was recovering from injury, but it is highly unlikely that any player, I don't care what your physical ability is, continues that high of efficiency, and I'm not going to sit here and project that insanity moving forward. The fourth red flag around Saquon going into 2020 is his schedule. According to Fantasy Pro, Saquon has the 4th hardest schedule for a running back in 2020. And let's look at that schedule, right? He kicks off the season against the Steelers, who were an elite defense last season. They only gave up 7 rushing touchdowns in 2019. That's first in the league, tied with only the Patriots. Then they play the Bears, who were a top 10 rush defense last season. Then they play the 49ers, who were another elite defense. They play the Cowboys twice, who were a top 12 in rushing defense. They also play the Eagles twice, who were ranked 3rd last season in rush defense. They play Tampa Bay in Week 8, who was the number 1 rush defense in 2019. And then in the fantasy championship, they play the Ravens, who was another elite rush defense, who just added Calais Campbell to that defensive line. I get that Saquon is a generational talent, but if you draft him, of course, you have to start him. And 56% of his games next season, so over half, are against elite rushing defenses that can slow down even the best running backs. And last but not least, flag number 5 is injury. Here is the injury that happened to him last season, Week 3 against Tampa Bay.
Barkley did not even really go to the bench very long. Here's the replay. Low tackle right there. Maybe that right ankle, perhaps, but
it is a brutal ankle injury, and on September 23rd, so a couple days after this, Adam Schefter reported that this injury would be likely on the longer side, between 4 to 8 weeks of recovery. Well, sure enough, because Saquon is just, again, a freak of nature, he returned, and it only took him 3 weeks to get back in the lineup. But Player Profiler ranks his high ankle sprain as a medium risk. So they have a low, medium, and high risk range, and they put him right in the middle at medium for re-injury in 2020. I'm not expecting that injury to slow him down, but I'm simply trying to calculate and get as little risk as possible in the first overall or in a top 2 pick. And Player Profiler has Barkley as an injury risk. So that's something to keep in mind. In conclusion, Saquon is an elite talent and arguably the best running back in the NFL today, but to get him on your fantasy team, you're going to have to invest a top 2 pick in him, and this leaves very little room for error. If you draft him there, you need him to be a lock for a top 3 running back every single week, and unfortunately, there are a surprising amount of ways where he doesn't finish there. I'm not calling Saquon a bust, right? And I'm not telling you not to draft him with the 102, but nobody in the industry right now is questioning Barkley as a top tier pick, and it's just simply not that simple. It's my job to present all the facts to you guys, to look at all the angles, so nobody is surprised if halfway through the season, Barkley isn't that elite top tier running back he was back in 2018. So if you combine the lack of targets, you combine the question marks around the new coaching staff, you combine the reality that he'll most likely be less efficient, you combine the horrendous schedule, and then of course the risk for re-injury, he is actually quite a risky top-tier running back, and these factors limit his weekly upside. So if someone comes to me, I would not argue with them if they want to take a safer pick like Zeke, who may have less upside but has way less red flags around him. If someone is concerned about the Giants offense and about how many targets Saquon will get, I would not knock them for considering Kamara over them. And then even Dalvin Cook, if he does get a large deal, which I'm expecting them to pay him a lot to be on that field, Cook was an elite. He was the RB2 in points per game last season. So I'm just saying all of these players are true workhorses that play on better offenses behind arguably better offensive lines, and I don't think it's crazy to take any of those players over Saquon. If you are a Giants fan or just straight up a Saquon truther, let me know in the comments below why Saquon should be taken with the first overall pick. And just remember that Saquon was drafted with the 101 pick last season, and a combination of all the red flags that I just mentioned lost fantasy owners their season in 2019. Nobody was happy that they took Saquon over Christian McCaffrey last season, and it wasn't just injuries that slowed Saquon's season down. If you've enjoyed this video and want to make sure to never miss any of these hot facts that I will be spitting, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and go follow me on Instagram at fantasy.football.buff. I appreciate you all, and we'll see you next time. Peace.